Hello, you multi-megalomaniacs, and thank you to Benny Fries. That's what it is. F-R-I-I-S, Fries. I think that's a Dutch name, actually. Or Belgian. And that's a malt mention, introducing Ralphie Review 966 Extras, in which, having just reviewed a naturally presented, unchill filtered, natural colour, because it says so, natural colour, it says unchill filtered collection, it says it on the label is the contract, it's where it matters. And when distilleries don't print, or bottlers don't print that information on the label, and then you have to try to go fact checking, you are vulnerable to being misinformed. Because what distilleries can do is say, oh, no, oh, honest, we don't chill filter our whiskey. But what they should be telling you is that it's winter time at the bottling plant, there's no need to spend energy in reducing the temperature of the whiskey, so we just switch the chill off, right? And we put a few extra paper plates in the chill filtration machine, and we just put the whiskey in unchilled. So technically it's not being chill filtered, but technically it's still being heavily filtered to remove the natural texture of the whiskey. But they're not lying, and they're not actually telling you the full story and telling you the truth. Therefore, beware of misinformation coming from official sources in the industry. This has been a problem for me over the years, in which I've gone to distilleries or gone to businesses to try and do some fact checks, and I've just been given the marketing wash, and it's no use, because I find from experience that they can be loose with the facts. Another classic example of this is in the colouring of whiskey. They will say, oh no, we don't add E150A to our whiskey. And technically they're telling the truth. But also they could be lying to you at the same time. Because what they have the option of doing at distilleries is when they're preparing the casks, right, having had them recoopered or reconditioned, and they're preparing the cask with some seasoning inside the cask, which could be some sherry, it could be some wine, it could be some bourbon that they've taken out of an industrial bulk container that they have lying in the cooperage, and they swirl out the raw contents inside the cask, and it kind of wets the cask and seasons it up and tones down any recharring they've done. And at the same time they're doing this, there is nothing illegal about adding E150 to that cask wash. It's perfectly legitimate, because they're not adding E150 to whiskey. They're adding whiskey or new make spirit to the cask, which can contain a syrup, a conditioning syrup, although it's been technically emptied out. But how empty is empty? Empty is completely open to translation. It's just real life. I'm not judging it. I'm just telling you it as it is. And therefore, you can be seriously misinformed when you believe that your whiskey doesn't contain E150A, and yet when the original contents went into a refurbished cask, there was E150A traces in that cask which have coloured the whiskey. The irony is that in fact when you add E150A to a cask at the beginning of maturation, the whiskey will assimilate it much more successfully, and it will become much more integrated than when it is being added literally hours before the whiskey is bottled in a bottling plant out of a stainless steel bucket tipped into a vat. Which is how they do it. Literally, big bucket of colour into the vat. Mixy. It's business. So beware of the risks of being ill-informed. It's everywhere. And sure, even online, this is important when people like me, if I have bloopers, then I come back to you later and say, by the way, what I said was a blooper. And I'll be doing that shortly. So look out for it. I'm more than happy to rectify any misinformation that I put out there, which is more than can be said occasionally, right? Occasionally, and even accidentally, by some whisky companies. Because some misinformation can be given out with the very best of intentions. I'll give you an example. The water we use for making our product comes from the Auchtybuchty River that runs down from the mountain stream. And look up, you can see the eagles soaring, and you can see the purple heather, and you can see the rutting stags. Isn't it romantic? Yet what they don't tell you is that when the whiskies mature, they send it concentrated at cask strength in delivery lorries to bottling plants in the central belt of Scotland, where the local water supply, which is not anything to do with the distillery, is then added to reduce the alcoholic strength of that whisky from that distillery down to either 40% or above. They don't mean to lie, but by default, they can do. And you're ill-informed. Be aware of that. Another thing about whisky, I'm going to come on to my main topic now, which is, I did a sort of love letter to Springbank recently, and well deserved, because I am very concerned that Scotch whisky's reputation can only be sustained in the long term by the indigenous high quality presentation by distilleries of what Scotch whisky is capable of being. And I really think that particularly large multinational companies, they do a very poor job of investing in maintaining the indigenous intrinsic quality that Scotch whisky is capable of being through heavily budgeted cask programs and through the overuse of hugely expensive, absurdly expensive marketing and promotionals, which barely have any impact in the outside world. The quality of videos is cliched, of high production value, but cliched, two-dimensional, superficial, and at times disingenuous. And it just looks like how some other movie used to look before so many movies came around. What is it, sweetheart? Practically every video now, you must have hearing. What's your hearing like, you? Hey, come here. You're getting picked up. The whisky fans want to see Fluffy. There you go. There you go. Want wee hugs? Want wee hugs? I tell you what, you're just loving the camera. That's what it is, you little cheeky rascal. This is Fluffy the cat. They have incredible hearing. They know when I'm coming down to record stuff at the bothy, and they believe that I must be giving them treats. I never give them treats in the bothy, but they still come down anyway, because they're nosy. Aren't you, Fluffy? They're just nosy. It's cats. Curiosity. Fortunately, they haven't started raiding my whisky cabinet yet, so fingers crossed on that one. So the price of whisky. Springbank is probably one of the most dramatically affected by the price of whisky due to its recent unavailability or perceived unavailability. It depends where you are in the world. There are quite a number of shops across the United States now who do not sell out of Springbank immediately because people don't know what it is. But this has come about because Springbank's small, high-end distillery, doing things traditionally, the way all distilleries in Scotland should do things. Employing people, generating the local economy, that sort of stuff. I mean, Springbank has got, 35 to 40 employees? But another equivalent sized distillery with a reputation, Lagavulin, has got, 3? Whole different culture of ownership and being proprietors. Whole different, polar opposite. Scotland needs more distilleries like Springbank to actually be the standard bearers for Scotch whisky's reputation, and we know because of the unavailability and the price that's now appearing, that's being demanded outside, not even outside the UK, in some UK shops as well, for Springbank, is that the demand for good quality single malt Scotch whisky, frankly, has never been higher in the history of the entire Scotch whisky industry. It's never been higher. There's never been more demand. There has never been more people be prepared to pay the premium now that they would have never have contemplated paying in the past. In the old days, and I'm not talking about that long ago now, 20 years of the old days, nobody was investing in whisky. All you had was a few folk that had a few dozen bottles as a collection, because they liked their bottles of whisky and they just loved being surrounded by the bottles when they were pouring some and drinking it and enjoying themselves. I mean, some folk went a bit far with it, like myself. At one point I had 2,000 bottles, but I was being obsessive. Now I don't have that many now, because I'm not quite so obsessive. As time changes. But the price of whisky, it's been going up and up and up steadily, but steeply for some brands, particularly for aged whiskies now, for about the last 8 years or more, 10 years, call it 10 years. And Springbank is now a victim of its own success, in that simply because of probably a lot to do with Brexit actually, and the difficulty of British products getting into the European market. It's been easier to get products into the United States market. And the way that's been facilitated is a new generation of importers, specialist importers, high-end importers who want to premiumise what they import for greater profits. It's business, which is why you're seeing bottles of 15-year-old Springbank for what, $500? Depends which state you're in. Depends how much knowledge there is within individual states. It does vary. Meanwhile, people are saying, well, I can't get Springbank anymore, I'll go for Kilkerran, but Kilkerran's going the same way, so they're saying, well, you know, what's next? Glen Scotia? Time will tell. Any distillery that makes good quality spirit, that actually bottles it like Signatory, unchill filtered, natural colour, and actually just stops taking the piss out of us and actually puts the information on the label, that piece of paper that forms the contract, the legal contract. Nobody's going to tell me I'm ill-informed about that, and nobody's going to misinterpret what I'm saying now. It's the fact of it. That label's the contract. And the more honest the disclosure, the more valuable the contents of the bottle. Because you don't need all this superficial, trite advertising to try and mask and paper over the cracks of just shoddy short-termism investment or lack of investment. Springbank does invest, and I do not resent for 1 minute the success that they have achieved from themselves. What I hope now is that if we can't get Springbank, and hey, I feel your pain because I can't buy it. People now going to the distillery, making a day trip to the distillery, are finding they're very restricted in what they can get. This distillery has invested in the future. The future has arrived. The future is now. That distillery's ready. Where's all the rest? Who's going to be the next distillery that actually kind of rubs the sleep out their eyes and says, do you know what, we can get a higher premium for our whisky if we start bottling our own at the distillery and actually get our grain delivered by farmers in lorries from Norfolk, for example, and we will do all our own malting, so as that the people who own, the corporations that own the main malting factories around Scotland can't hold us to ransom anymore, can't hold a gun to our head and saying, do you know, you're getting too popular, we're rationing you. You're asking too much, you're getting rationed. Because that's what's happening. It's real life. Other whiskies have jumped up in price. Diageo, for example, in their connoisseurs type range, have seriously jacked up the price of their high-end status whiskies like Lagavulin, and even Caol is being affected. Which is why, ironically, one of the best ones that you want to go for is Cragganmore. Probably the best of the lot at the moment. I mean, I have to say I've virtually given up on Lagavulin now. I mean, why open a bottle knowing it's been absolutely, totally chill filtered to diminish it? Why do you want to invest good money into that? Why invest in disappointment? It's not worth the currency. It really isn't. And this is where we have to start shopping. Seriously shopping. We can't just sort of bang the table and be resentful about the fact that we can't get the whiskies we used to enjoy. If we were smart, we stocked up at the time. And I know a few of you have done that. Now we look around. What's next? Where do we go next? We look at the independent bottlers. And we do the online research. Because you won't find... Forget the magazines, newspapers and the formal channels. They'll tell you nothing. Well, they'll tell you very little. It's got to be done online. Is some stellar bottling been done by an online retailer? Fine, got to get in quick. What's the price? Is it worth it? Yes. Is it not worth it? No, don't buy it. Move on. Isle of Arran, Glencadam, Ardnamurchan. Prices are still reasonable, but I can assure you those prices will go up. I'll tell you one reason why the price is going to go up. One very serious reason. It's because it's not just your currency and my currency. It's every global currency is being systematically devalued over time by inflation. And inflation is a deliberately manipulated mechanism by central banks. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. The reason your whiskey is so expensive is because your currency just doesn't buy you what it used to buy. It's been devalued. And you can see this every time you look at intelligent financial resources. Books, for example. Also, the cost of making whiskey. The cost of making whiskey has, and I'm going to pick my words carefully here, in the last couple of years, it's exploded. Boom. Energy alone. The cost of energy in Scotland is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Gas. Many distilleries are powered by gas that fuel their steam boilers. And of course, there's all sorts of regulations and environmental, clean energy, etc. that's coming in that's being forced onto distilleries who go through a lot of energy, a lot of heating and cooling and heating and cooling. In fact, energy costs a lot more than the actual materials used for making whiskey. But we're invited not even to think about this. We're told by the ambassadors, oh, we've got a premium here, we've had to put the prices up because we're such a luxury product and such demand, blah, blah, blah. What they don't tell you is actually the cost of the gas they used has trebled. And it's absurd and it's ridiculous when there are gas fields literally all round the coastline of Scotland. This, I can assure you, is all part of the human condition. And I'm sure many of you can see exactly where I'm coming from. In understanding the human condition, it's all about manipulation. And whiskey is heavily manipulated. There's now more laws being explored to restrict messaging about whiskey, advertising. And see, for distilleries like Springbank and Ardnamurchan, for Arran and Glencadam, and for independent bottlers like Signatory, that won't be a problem. Because it's the lack of messaging that delivers the integrity of the product. As simple as that. But the cost of whiskey, it can only rise because the cost of everything rises. And we can't complain for those that are buying Springbank and those who are paying the hefty premium. Good luck to them. Let's move on. And let's encourage each and every opportunity we have, every and any distillery we come across in the world. I tell you what, folks, you do it like Springbank, and I look forward to buying your whiskey. Because if Springbank can do it, any distillery can do it. My goodness, imagine Jura. Imagine Jura owned by Springbank. Imagine Lagavulin owned by Springbank. Imagine Mortlach owned by Springbank. Imagine Glenlivet owned by Springbank. It would go back immediately to its former great glory that it enjoyed hundreds of years ago. Because so many owners of modern distilleries, they do not do their product justice. They just don't. It's all about cutting the costs. And in doing so, they end up waiting for their bottles to sell. And you can tell these bottles in the shop because they're the ones when the retailer or the seller brings them off the shelf, they have to wipe the dust off because they've just been sitting, waiting and waiting and waiting. Because people don't want to buy them because because they are an amazing experience delivered as mediocrity. And that's real whiskey. We're involved in this is a sign of the times. So many people know what real whiskey is now. That all of us get wound up when it's no longer available to us, or when it is, the price is so high. And I don't see anything changing now. I'm surprised the bubble's gone on as long as it did, but it's still going on. And global demand for high-end whiskey is, I know how big it is because I know where my audience is coming from in this channel and how incredibly and wonderfully diverse it is. It's all around the planet. Every corner of the planet. There's whiskey fans, real whiskey fans. And do you know what? I'm glad to share your company. I'm Ralphie. Hope you've enjoyed this. We'll see you soon. Now, where's that little big red clicker? It's the end of the video now, folks. See you soon.